Hello everyone. Today I wanted to talk about 10 things, and this isn't a complete list, it's just the 10 things I could come up with quickly about what happens when your neighborhood is converted to rentals. For example, my neighborhood was built around the 1950s, 1960s, and every single person here owned their home. Each piece of land is not very large. It's about less than an acre, and they're like ranch style homes or two-story ranch homes. I don't live in that section of the neighborhood because I grew up on a farm, so I live in the back, in the wooded area, away from the neighborhood, but I do consider myself part of the neighborhood. When I was growing up here, I knew everybody in the neighborhood, and it was a pleasant place to grow up for the most part. Over the years, since I've become a homeowner, these are things I've noticed because of private homes, private real estate being turned into rentals from these large leasing companies or people that want to buy real estate to make a living. I have quite a few friends that bought a house and then bought a second house to rent out. One such friend is an actual restaurant owner, and he got into real estate to invest the money he made from the restaurant. And now he has, some houses, not here, but in another state where it's more of a tourist destination. And he's put a lot of money into these places for people to rent, but they're not in the middle of neighborhoods. In my neighborhood, just about every other house now is a rental. So the people aren't here long term anymore, and I don't get to know my neighbors. And it's not a friendly place anymore. It's actually very hostile. So I just want to go over some of the things I've encountered personally from this. The first thing is trash. Just about everybody, whether you rent or own, you have to pay for trash removal in one way or another. I mean, I guess the inner cities might have trash collections or whatever on the street. I don't know. I've never lived like that. But, here I have to pay. In fact, in some areas here, some places you have to buy your specific trash bags from grocery stores. Not in my town, but in my town, we have to buy certain trash receptacles that the garbage companies provide. And we're responsible for them. And if they need to be replaced, we have to buy them. So there's all different criteria, requirements, rules, and so forth regarding trash. But what I've noticed is when there are people that don't own the properties, but they rent, and not everybody. Okay, I was a renter once, and guess what? I never did this. So I'm not saying all renters do this. What I'm saying is a lot of the times they don't buy the trash receptacles, and the landlord that now owns that house doesn't provide it for the tenant. So they don't actually dispose their garbage the right way. They'll either burn it, which causes other problems, and it's actually illegal here. I know not everywhere it's illegal. It's illegal here to burn trash, especially right in the middle of a neighborhood where you have 100 houses. The other thing too is they'll let it stockpile in a garage or outdoor space. And then that's how rodents come in. That's how people get things like bugs and stuff. And then it goes on to spread through other houses. So that's number one, the trash. Number two, dogs. I am an animal lover. I've had dogs pretty much my whole life until recently. I had two dogs that were elderly up until last year when they passed on. So I am a dog lover. I do not mind dogs at all. This neighborhood, the homeowners usually have a fenced-in area for their dog, but the ones that rent, they don't respect other people's properties, and they're coming onto private land. I've had people do this to me. They come into my yard and they treat it like a park. They don't pick up after themselves. They let their dog run around in my yard. Now, when I had dogs, I had a pit bull and a border collie. So this made an unsafe area for me, even though it was my own yard. Now, down in the front, I don't have an actual full fence because I have a large lot, and it would be extremely expensive and unaffordable to put a fence down there. My dogs mostly hung out in my backyard, but when they got older, I had a smaller fenced-in area for them somewhere else, but it became extremely unsafe when people that weren't from here with these massive dogs would come into my yard, sometimes 2, 3 at a time, and let their dogs just take over my yard. And that's a problem. Even though I love dogs, I have a neighbor right now who's doing that. He has which are illegal, but he has a wolf hybrid. I don't have dogs anymore, but one day I was driving down my road here and the dog jumped on my car and scratched the side of it because he was letting it come on my property. And I asked him to please knock it off because it's my land. And he told me that his dog loves my yard and he's not going to stop. The time before that, the person renting the same exact house on the street told me that they weren't from here, that they were from an inner city, and they thought my yard was a park, was a public park, even though there's no trespassing signs, private property signs. They still said that to me until I had to take action to stop them from bringing their dog up. I did actually build my own fence. I put up an inexpensive chicken wire fence. I went out there after having enough. I pounded the stakes in the yard. I put the fence up myself. It still doesn't stop them. Now what they do is they come up to where my cars are parked. They go beyond that and around the fence and into my yard. That is trespassing. Yes, I could take legal action. But the bigger picture here is, why are they doing this? They have a park nearby. We have one of the biggest dog parks here anywhere. So that's just 2 examples there of what happens when people aren't owners of real estate in a neighborhood and where renters aren't properly vetted. I'm not trying to be offensive to anybody who rents because, again, I was a renter, but these things, I never did these things. So I don't understand the mentality behind it. The third one is blight laws. We never had blight laws here until recently, and it was because of people that were moving in here and renting, and they didn't, like, for example, the trash, they weren't taking the trash out, but another thing was they were boarding up windows. It was the strangest thing. They were just boarding up windows, and the town came in and made an ordinance about blight. It's usually when, people have broken windows or have piles of trash in their yard or have multiple cars that are broken down and unregistered and stuff like that. Our town took action because these things were going on at a rapid pace and it was bringing the property values down. The next one may not happen everywhere, but it was happening to me. Years ago, a renter moved in to a house in the neighborhood and he was actually close to my property line. And he started throwing rocks and sticks in my yard for no reason. He didn't have a dog. It was just to throw rocks and sticks in my yard to get him out of his. Now, I have a pile where I put stuff like that, and then I have it hauled away twice a year by this company. They charge me like $400 twice a year. They come in with their big trucks with multiple men. They load up these trucks with all that kind of debris and bring it to the town dump. Because here it's free to dump that kind of stuff. In fact, the town takes all those leaves and brush trimmings and everything and turns it into mulch. Then people can go up there and get free mulch. But this guy, instead of making, a garbage can just for his debris in his yard or taking it to the dump, he threw it in my yard. Well, have you ever tried to mow over rocks and sticks? What a pain, right? And why should I have to rake all that up before mowing? So I asked him very politely. I saw him doing it one day and I walked up to him because I was out there mowing. I said, "Excuse me, did you know this was my yard?" Because I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I thought maybe he didn't even know it was my yard. And he says, "Yeah." I said, "Well, you're throwing your debris in my yard. That's not cool. I wouldn't do that to you." And he said, "Well, too bad. I don't want it in my yard." But these were his trees. They weren't my trees. These were his rocks. They weren't my rocks. And I was just like in disbelief, like, really, this is what it's come down to now? I said, well, I think we need to have this conversation because that's not kosher. You shouldn't be doing that. This is my yard. Now I have to clean that up before I can mow. He moved out. I told the landlord about it because I actually knew that family that owned the house. They sold the property the next year because they were tired of dealing with these kinds of complaints from their tenants and the renters they put in there. The next one, and I believe this is number 5 on my list, they don't upkeep their yards. We have regulations here. We never used to, but we now have regulations that say your grass can't be higher than, say, 6 inches or something like that. We don't necessarily have a homeowners association. It's through zoning in the town. So they tell us, oh, well, you can't have your grass over 6 inches high. And this is through their blight ordinances that they published. I try to be really committed to that and just, mow the grass, even though I'm up from the neighborhood, nobody really sees it anyway. But I follow rules too, I don't want to make somebody else upset because I'm not following the rules. So I try to do my part. Well, whether I agree with the rule or not, I still try to get along with people. And what I'm noticing is if the landlords of these houses don't have lawn care agreements in place when they rent, the people that rent do not keep their lawns up. They let them go. Right now, one of the people in the neighborhoods, their lawn is like 1.5 feet high. I'm surprised nobody's actually called them out for that or called the town. I don't get involved in that. I don't do that to my neighbors. I'm just saying people do that, and I'm surprised nobody has. There is a man down the street here who has diabetes, and he has to be taken away by ambulance at least once a week for different therapy and everything. And I've seen neighbors get together and mow his lawn for him, and that warms my heart. I think that's amazing and awesome, and I'm glad and I'm grateful. But when it comes down to just, you don't feel like it, you got to keep everybody in mind. You got to keep your neighbors in mind. You can't just say, well, I'm not going to deal with it, because it does bring down the property values of everyone. And the landlords absolutely should be taking notice and doing something about it. The next thing is crime. There was a house near me that was owned by the same family since the 1950s, but they all passed on. Their family didn't want the house, so it was sold. That was turned into a rental immediately. The company that came in and bought it was a huge rental company. They weren't a homeowner. And it's a darn shame that this happens, because every single tenant they've put in there has been a criminal. And I'm not talking about, oh, they're a thief or anything like that. What I'm saying is the very first renter that went in was selling stolen car parts, and they were driving up in the road like every hour of the night and disturbing the whole entire neighborhood by just goofing off. Like they would get on top of their own cars and ride around, or they would peel out. They would do stuff like that until the landlord finally took court action and got him out. But that didn't even help. The next people, they were setting fires in the woods and using like illegal fireworks, and almost burnt my house down. They finally were removed by the landlord. I had a break for some years. A military lady moved here, and she was absolutely wonderful. We got along great, but sadly that lasted 3 years and she moved away. And then ever since, there was nothing but problems. One guy was a hoarder, and he would go to the town dump and get stuff out of the dump and get free stuff out of the dump. And he hoarded up the entire property with boats, cars, grills, car parts, motors, engines, anything he could get, even old picnic tables, right? And then he also hoarded animals. I started having animal parts thrown in my yard after he would do whatever it was really gross. I finally called animal control and said, hey, what is going on here? I don't want animal parts in my yard. And they came out and they said, oh, he is a habitual offender. He does this everywhere he goes. We've been watching him for 20 years. And I said, you're kidding. And now he's living next to me. Oh, that's nice. And I said, this is a neighborhood. You know, people take pride when they own something. And when I rented, I took pride. I didn't do this to other people. What is going on here? She's like, yeah, we've tried to contain this person and this is just what they do. And I'm like, that's not acceptable. He finally was evicted after he took dynamite. Can't make this up. It's a true story. And blew a hole out of the house. He was trying to make a root cellar and he blew it up with dynamite. The landlord finally evicted him, and it took a long time because he kept getting extensions. It's like the landlords themselves are having issues with these tenants. It's not just me saying this, it's the landlords too. Finally, the landlord put somebody else in that house, and they turned out to be really bad people. And when I say that, I mean, like, I was out in my yard once. I try to keep to myself. I do yard work a lot in the spring, summer, and I was out there trying to rein in the poison ivy vines. And there was a little patch of land I have with stone wall, and it was growing up the trees, and I wanted to get it before it grew the berries so that the birds wouldn't disperse it everywhere. I'm trying to be a good neighbor here, right? And these people started stalking me on my own land, and they were driving up and down the road and stalking me. Now, I can hold my own for that. I don't need to call the police for that. Okay, I can hold my own for that. But it shouldn't happen. Nobody should be intimidated just doing your yard work and doing your own thing, because these people actually were criminals. They were in a crime network, which is kind of scary. And because they were in a criminal network, they started having their friends coming up here, like monitoring me, my activity, because they thought I was spying on them because they're paranoid. I wasn't spying on them. I don't really care what you do. Just as long as it's not unsafe for me. I have a fence between properties, so I can't see what goes on anywhere to one side of my property. So if somebody lives up in those houses, I don't care. Not my problem, not my circus, not my monkeys, okay? But it's not cool if somebody's out there doing lawn work. You have no business intimidating somebody for taking care of their yard. Finally, the landlord got these folks out too. Actually, they just up and left. One day I came home and they were walking their dog in my yard. I had also seen them on my home security system coming up to the front of my house. And at the time, I saw on the news where people were planting cell phones in people's yards to keep track of them so they could rob their house. I didn't know if that's what their intention was or not, but I wasn't taking any chances. But when I saw them on my property one day after work, I had enough. And I said, you need to get off my property. They just up and moved out. They never were seen again. Finally, in this same house, the neighbor is really nice. She's actually a professional, a young professional. And she goes out once a week to get her groceries or whatever. But other than that, she is working from home. And it's been nothing but pleasant. But I had to go through years of criminals living next to me in order to get to this point where I actually have a really good neighbor. Now around here, of course, with more people you have, there's going to be more parties. There's going to be birthday parties. There's going to be summer parties, Hey, I think that's awesome, There's not a whole lot of parking though. Like the driveways here are very small because most people have like a one-story house here. So when they do have parties, the party parking is around the entire neighborhood. I don't mind that. I'm cool with that. Like everybody has a right to have a party. There is a park around the corner where people could actually park, but I'm not one to make a problem if somebody's having a party. Good for you, However, a town close by is a very quaint, how do I say it? It's a town on like a lake river. It's very, very quaint. People come from all over to vacation there. And one of the things that the residents there are now complaining about, because there are plenty of Airbnbs, there are plenty of hotels, there are plenty of bed and breakfasts. There's plenty of places for people from out of state to stay because it is a tourist area in this particular town. But what the people there are now complaining about are the parties caused by the residential houses that were bought up within the last few years and turned into these Airbnbs where people go just to party. And it's causing that town grief. I'm not condemning Airbnbs, and I'm not condemning people who stay in Airbnbs by any stretch of the imagination, but just think about it for a minute. You have a house on a quiet cul-de-sac or near a lake. You moved there for peace and quiet. You've been there for 40 years, and now all of a sudden, every other house or 10 houses right next to you are Airbnbs, and the people don't live here, they don't work here, they're not from here, and they come in just to have parties that keep you awake all night. You know what I'm saying? So if you think about it through their lens, this is what I'm talking about, okay? This is exactly what happens when neighborhoods are turned into rentals instead of private homesteads where people take ownership of a house, go to work to pay for it. Now you have people that are renting these houses that aren't caring for them properly, that are causing a ruckus in the neighborhood. And everybody knows, you know, we all deserve some kind of peace, quiet, respect for our property. I don't think anybody could disagree with that, although I'm sure there will be people who disagree with that. But that's the bottom line. Even if you rent, that doesn't mean you don't have pride in taking care of the property or being a respectful citizen or being a respectful, you know, neighbor. The next one is a parking issue. Like I said, there's not a lot of on-street parking here. Each home is really close together. Now, these houses were built in a time where there wasn't a lot of open space. Open space land has become not just a thought, not just an idea, but actually code written in the zoning laws here. We have people that protect our open space and don't allow any building on it, which I think is a good thing, because otherwise we would just be house, cement, no green space. So it's a good thing. And basically because of that, the houses are close together with small lots of land, and they have a driveway that maybe can accommodate 1 or 2 cars, but the on-street parking might be able to accommodate 1 vehicle in front of their house. So I live up in the back, like I said, in a wooded area. This land is mine, but then there's a private road, and the private road goes way up in the back, and there's other houses up there. And what happens is this all was here first back in the 50s. And then when the 60s came and they built the neighborhood built all these houses, but this road was actually here first. Now, I'm not saying anything about that in particular. What I'm saying is, what I've noticed is, and this may have happened to you once or twice. I have heard other people talking about this, regardless if they live up in the back or, you know, right smack in the middle of a neighborhood. People will come and park right in the middle of the driveway so nobody can get in and out. I have a private road that goes back. Now, what does a private road mean? Well, here, what it actually means is that it services the houses up here, but it's not a drive-through. Like, you can't just drive through it and go elsewhere. It's a dead end. That's what it means. So this is a subdivision, but it doesn't lead anywhere. It only leads to these houses. So there's no reason for somebody that doesn't live here to drive through, because you can't get anywhere. You can't go to the highway. You can't go to a store. You can only get to somebody's house. And what I have noticed over the years, it didn't happen when I was, you know, growing up. Over the years, what I've seen are people will come and say they're visiting a friend or having a party or whatever. They just park in front of the opening to the road and they block it for anybody to come and go. So if you have, say you have 10 houses in a private road, right? Those 10 houses will have company, or those 10 houses will have people that live there that need to get in and out of the road. But now you have people that don't live around here that come to visit, and they just park their truck or car or whatever right in front of the road, and now nobody can get out or in. And it makes for a very chaotic situation, and it's bad. It's also a hostile situation. One time I was leaving my driveway and a neighbor close by had a party. This neighbor has like it's a very small house, and I would say it's no more than 800 square feet. But they had a party, and they had like a kind of a big backyard. So they had like 25 people over. Well, all these people had to find parking. So they were all over the road. They were blocking other neighbor driveways. It was chaos, messy, and not good. I suggested, because now I'm coming down the road and I need to get into my driveway or my private road, right? So I suggested that, hey, you know what? There's a park around the corner. You guys can all park there so you're not blocking traffic, because they were actually parking in the middle of the main road, so nobody could even drive around the neighborhood, and it was causing an actual dangerous situation. And the guy got very upset with me, and I said, but you're also blocking the entrance to this road here, and this services many houses and nobody can get in or out. And mind you, we pay taxes, okay? It's not like we just live here rent free, okay? And the guy literally said, too bad, you can wait till my party is over. I don't have a fuse long enough for that. When it's necessary, I can unleash a wrath. It was unleashed. Let me just say that. The wife comes out of the house. She gave him a tongue lashing like I've never heard. He moved the car. So ultimately, that can be a real problem. Now, I've also lived in a city at one time. It's always like that. I always parked in a parking garage, but city parking is like that. It's hardly any parking. It's a pain in the neck. It could be a big nuisance. I actually had, many people complain about it when I lived in a city that, somebody took their parking space or what have you. I don't live in a city now, so you'd think it wouldn't be an issue, but it remains to be an issue. Also, growing up in the 70s, 80s, I was a kid that could walk around my block freely. I could ride my bike freely, and I did so all the time. The traffic wasn't as bad here. We had like 1 to 2 cars going through the neighborhood because everybody was at work all day. So in the summer, it was pretty much safe for me to ride my bike, roller skate, walk. I never had a problem. Everybody knew who I was. They'd come out of their house. They would wave hi. They would go to get their mail. Oh, hey, how you doing? Tell your grandparents I said hello. Tell your mom I said hi. Everybody was super friendly. As the years have gone by, I don't know the people anymore, because people that are coming in and renting are here temporarily for whatever reason, whether they're coming in to work here or whether they're coming in to test the area out before they buy a house of their own, or before they can actually get into a better apartment if they don't want to live in the house. Some people prefer apartment living. They don't want to take care of the grass. They don't want to take care of the maintenance that comes with the house if it's not pre-written into their lease agreement of what they have to do, right? So sometimes people prefer a condominium or a townhouse or an apartment building. Sometimes people move here temporarily just so that they can get into one of those places because there's a waiting list. There's all reasons, but what I've noticed, sadly, over the past, I would even say 20 years, really, is that people are really hostile to one another, and there's no safe place now in the neighborhood, and that's really, really, really sad to me. I know the freedoms I enjoyed as a child. I know the happy people that lived in the neighborhood, and I know how we all got along for the most part. There was always the 1 or 2 exceptions, but for the most part, we all got along. Today, it's mostly people we don't know, that don't care to meet you, that don't want to know your name, that don't ask your name, that could care less if you're breathing or not. That's what my neighborhood, the majority of them, that's what it's made of now. And it's really super sad. I could probably tell you, well, let's see. I know 1 neighbor, 2 neighbors, 3 neighbors, 4. I know 4 neighbors in this entire neighborhood where at one time I knew everybody. My final and 10th point are safety concerns. Speaking to all that I just said, trash, dogs, blight, throwing rocks and sticks in somebody else's yard where they mow, not upkeeping their own mowing, more rampant crime, more parties than ever before, which creates parking issues and unsafety for the citizens that live here round the clock permanently, and hostility towards the people who aren't from here or who haven't lived here long or who aren't permanent residents here that just are moving on temporarily to their next destination. Safety is a major concern. Everybody I know here is talking about this, and I have yet heard one person that doesn't agree with me on this. When I was growing up here, I rarely heard a siren. Rarely, ever. The more I heard was the sirens I used to hear back in the 70s and 80s was an emergency alert testing siren. Every Saturday morning around 10, 11 a.m., they would have this loud intercom come over and talk about, this is a test. This is a test of the emergency broadcast system. Now, some of you might have cable, and some of you have seen it on your cable TV where every once in a while that occurs. This used to be broadcast through a large speaker that was posted and hung on telephone poles everywhere here. We don't have that anymore. In fact, I can't tell you the last time I saw an intercom on a telephone pole. Those have all been taken down. And they don't do that anymore because it's through the cable companies now. Another thing were fireboxes on telephone poles. So say you're walking down the street in the 70s and 80s and you saw a house fire, you could run to a near telephone pole and pull that fire alarm. And the fire department would be there in seconds. They don't have those now. They took them all out of the neighborhood because now everybody has cell phones and can call 911. Roughly around, let me see when this was, the mid-90s, I visited an inner city away from here and they still had them. I was with the fire department. I was not a fire person. I'm not a hero. I was with the canteen truck and I served beverages and refreshments to the heroes on scenes. And that inner city still had those fire alarm boxes, fire call boxes, and people could still pull them. I don't know if that's the same today that was in the 90s. Here we are in 2026. And now what I'm observing are police, ambulance, rescue, and fire trucks nonstop all day long. I had somebody over last week working on something, and he's older. He's an older gentleman. He owns a company, and he said to me, I cannot get over how things have changed around here. He's from here his whole life. He said the same thing. When he was a kid, he never heard one siren. That's all we hear night and day. Now, we've gotten used to it, so we can kind of turn it out, but the thing about that is, why? Why are people calling 911 so much? It's sad to me. It's like, what's causing this? Also, they voted in my town, not the residents, the politicians, to take out a firehouse near me, like a block away. They took it out recently and they made it into a farm for marijuana. And the residents were in an uproar. In fact, shortly after that, somebody's house actually burnt down because the fire department is too far away. And that really concerns me as well. I'm in the same neighborhood. We're replacing common sense. So while I'm not condemning people that own homes and rent them, I'm not condemning renters. I want you to understand that These are factual things that are going on when people don't care about their property, when people don't care because they live in a temporary house or something. They don't put pride in it. They don't care about it. That's not always. Like I said, I was a renter too. So please don't take offense at this and say, well, I'm a renter and you're offending me. No. That's not my intention here. My intention here is to show you, if you've owned your house for 30, 40, 50 years and this is going on, I'm sure you can relate. I'm sure you've seen some of this anyway. But it just seems to be getting worse and worse. It got so bad here a little while ago. My elderly neighbor that lives up here on this private road too, he actually went to a welder and had private property signs welded together and put them at the beginning of the road so people would stop parking and blocking us in, and they would stop coming up here with their dogs and letting them poop all over our lawns. And let me just see how I can say this, because I've had somebody say this in the past to me. I'm not looking out for myself here. I'm not some outrageous snob, okay? I'm talking for the benefit of everyone. This is a problem. It's not just because I live up a private road. It's not just because I'm a snob. It's because this is how the world is going, and I want people to recognize it and see it for what it is through the lens of how it's affecting other people, not just myself. So before you leave that comment talking against me, just try to put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's actually going through this, who owns their home, takes pride, and mows their lawn, so everybody's property value can retain the equity and not go down. Because you know what, at the end of the day, I bet your tax bill won't go down. When your property value goes down because your neighbor next door doesn't care, your property tax will not go down.